Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Shane Oley from Maria Events. Tonight, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Marcus Scotney and Sarah Ingram, the 2024 Cape Wrath Ultra champions. Also, my colleague Libby will be here to help us this evening. Before we get started, I just do a little bit of admin. So we are recording this and it will be on YouTube maybe in about 24 hours after we finish off this evening. Um, if you have any questions during the evening, drop them into the chat or even drop them into the Q&A. We'll tend to do questions at the end, and normally we get through most of the questions. Um, if either any of I guess the four of us hosting and being interviewed this evening are interrupted by internet connection problems, and myself and Libby are in different locations, so it'd be that Libby takes over. That has happened before. The internet died, and it was in the hands of my trusted colleagues. So I'm going to start with a little introduction. I'll start with Sarah. Sarah is this year's Cape Wrath Ultra champion. She's got a great story of her that I think she'll share with us this evening about the event this year. She's a Sheffield resident. I spent 10 years living in Sheffield, so I know the kind of outdoor scene pretty well there. She's a runner, she's a climber, similar interests to me, and also a doctor, and has worked for us on the other business we have called Shelterstone, providing kind of medics to other event organisers. Marcus, I think, probably needs a little introduction to anyone who's been involved in running for any period of time. He's a GB ultra runner. He was Dragon's Back champion in 2017 and a double Cape Wrath winner. So he was the winner of the inaugural event in 2016 and has returned to celebrate his 50th birthday. And he's won this year. And I've got to be honest, as I look down the barrel of my 50th birthday, I am definitely inspired that it can still be done as we get older and we try to. I was going to say age with grace, but I'm not going to say that. Age disgracefully. So let us get going. Sarah, I'm going to start asking you the first question. I would just like you to maybe explain why, of all the choices and all the races, you decided that Cape Wrath was where you were going to put your energy and time. What was the reason?
Wow. I mean, I think to anyone who's looked at it in any depth at all, it doesn't need much justification. I think you need to look at any of the photos, any of the videos, and just some of those vistas, which we were actually able to see this year because we were so lucky. I just think it captures the imagination immediately, or certainly it captured mine straight away. As soon as I heard about it, started looking at it. And I think in terms of why that's specific style of race. For me, I mean, I call it a race. I think it I think I didn't go into it particularly with that mindset. It drew me in as a journey and an adventure. I think the nature of it, with 8 days just away from life, responsibility, and you're just in this just stripped back existence where you just wake up, you have an objective, and it's yeah, and you run it. It's just sort of deeply appealing. I can see Marcus nodding. It's just, yeah, something so, just the essence of adventure and everything that makes life wonderful. So yeah, I think Scotland holds huge draw for me. I, I've spent more time probably. Well, my husband used to live in Dundee, and so we've kind of spent a bit more time exploring sort of Cairngorm, some sort of eastern Scotland a bit more. But I'd always dreamed of going kind of northwest, and just doing more up there. And this just seemed a perfect opportunity to explore places which actually logistically, without the infrastructure that Aurea, that you put in place with this race, is when you actually start to look into planning it without that infrastructure, it becomes so difficult. So to have it in a package where you just kind of pitch up and start running. Yeah, and in terms of, for me personally, I think the structure of a stage race definitely plays to my strengths in terms of the distances each day. I think are really comfortable with, and then being able to actually stop, rest, eat lots of food, have an evening, and then recover the next day and hope your legs feel a bit fresher. It seems to work quite well for me. So yeah.
Great. Well, that's a wonderful summary of kind of the appeal of Cape Wrath, and I guess I'll just add for the audience this evening that Cape Wrath Ultra in 2025 had 6 absolutely glorious days. So the first 6 days of the race, it was just wall-to-wall sunshine and blue skies. In the background behind me, that's day 3 from this year. Then we got a bit of kind of Scottish weather on day 7, a bit of low cloud, a bit of rain, and I think that reminded everybody what it can be like without being too severe. And then the final day was very windy, again, reminding us what Scotland can be like. Marcus, I would like to ask you, so when you ran in 2016, it was the first edition of the race. I'm interested because you've got this extraordinary perspective over almost 10 years of how that race has evolved, how the course has evolved, but also your course record. Well, your time from 2016 is the course record. There must have been a pretty big driver to want to come back and do it all again in 2025. And perhaps you could share some of your insights.
Yeah, I mean, ever since crossing that finish line in Lighthouse 9 years ago, there's always the desire to go back to the race. And I remember afterwards going, like, what's next? And there was no other race like it other than the Dragon's Back, which is why I then came and completed the Dragon's Back. And that, I tried going back to the race and I never would. But Cape Wrath is, yeah, as Sarah was saying, the whole sense of the course, sense of adventure, and that opportunity to really disconnect for 8 days and just live in this bubble of run, eat, sleep. It's really self-indulgent in some respects. But what was interesting is, talking about how's it changed over the 9 years or 10 years. I mean, the beauty of Scotland is still there. The course is still the same. But part of it was more just from your side of things, the infrastructure of it, the support at camp. That's kind of really kind of stepped up a notch. It's kind it was professional 9 years ago, but on a smaller scale. But now it's even more professional. And yeah, this whole you feel really valued as an athlete. It's well supported and looked after from every aspect, from the medics to the hot drinks little kind of kiosk area to those doing the tents. Yeah, that whole atmosphere is just wonderful. And then the kind of people out on the course, the mountain crew looking after you. So that was really interesting to see how that has grown. And then also having more competitors out on the field as well, because that first year there was only 96 of us, and only kind of 46 or 50 finished. So the field kind of shrunk a lot more. But yeah, and interestingly as well, and this isn't. I don't think this is more just how popular the route is getting as a backpacking trip. That there were more trods than I remember 9 years ago, and that photo from day 3 as you climb up to that BLAC out of Neudart. I remember 9 years ago we just had a steep wall of grass to climb up, and it was very much kind of clambering up it, where now there's a really good kind of trod zigzagging up with cairns. And I hope that wasn't there 9 years ago and I completely missed it and was running on a GPS track, and it was probably kind of 10 meters to one side. As I was being chased by Tom, I was like, I'm just going to get up this hill as quick as possible. But yeah, they're the kind of main changes that I kind of noticed in the event. But also I mean, we had some good weather 9 years ago, which kind of, the first few days were typically Scottish, and then it got better and better. And I almost felt like a fraud every time I was doing kind of webinars and workshops with the athletes I was working and coaching for the race, showing them my photos from it. Okay, this is what it could be like. And then, was it 21 when you had the really wet year?
22.
22. Yeah. And so my athletes were kind of like, you said this. But yeah. I mean, it's but the journey hasn't changed. It's the support around it. You've just taken it up to a kind of complete new level.
Well, thank you for saying that. And we certainly put the participants' experience at the heart of what we try to do, particularly in the camps. And as a race organizer, I really want the participants to grab that sense of being self-sufficient and doing it for themselves on the course. But then once they're in camp, I want to flip it and I want them to feel loved and looked after and supported and kind of recharged and ready to go next day. Sarah, I was going to ask you. In fact, you said earlier that the multi-day format suited you, but had you actually done a multi-day race before? And how did you approach your training and your preparation for the event?
Yeah, so you're quite right. I have not I have not done a multi-day race before. I've done in a kind of non-race setting some sort of solo supported multi-day, I suppose, pursuits just of kind of my own, well, not my own imagining, but just some amazing, inspiring routes. So sort of Southwest Coast Path and Tour de Monte Rosa and that sort of thing. So I think I guess I've learned about myself over the years of running that although I've not necessarily embarked into the kind of mega long ultra distance before, I've kind of tried my hand at running a decent distance in a day and then doing it again and then again on repeat. And so that I kind of had, although I've not done it in a race context at all before, other than I suppose GL3D and mountain marathons and things, you get the 1 or 2 day, 2 or 3 days, but never 8 days before. And I suppose to answer your question about the approach to training, I mean, it's a huge question that I could probably talk for much longer than we have about, but I suppose one thing which I bang on about all the time, medically and personally, is strength training, and specifically heavy weights. And I know it's, different people have different approaches, but for me, I think particularly for women, heavier weight training, I think has been, it can be really transformative from an injury prevention point of view, and just to kind of build your body into something that is robust and can recover and can withstand sort of distances and over longer periods. So for me, and it's not a new thing that I brought in. I've sort of lifted weights for a really long time, but kind of bringing it into a really consistent sort of non-negotiable, this has to happen every week, all throughout the last year really. So that kind of weekly non-negotiable, and it's not fancy at all. It's those kind of big compound sort of lifts, so things like your deadlifts, squats, upper body as well. I think we underestimate in running how important upper body. Obviously, you mentioned I like climbing, so it contributes well to that. But I think using poles and actually just having kind of a balanced, kind of robust body is really important. So yeah, I would say that is essential. And then for me, some more sort of, that's the big muscle groups, but some smaller targeted things. So I would kind of be guided by a physio who was helping me through an injury earlier in the year for some really specific sort of really targeted muscles. So for me, kind of glutes and some sort of abductor muscles. So that's really important, I think. And I like to think hopefully got me through, because I came into the race feeling very tentative about recent injury and really was taking it day by day. But weirdly, I didn't feel the injury at all, which completely blew my mind, because it was not what I expected. And I think I'd probably put that down to the weight training going into it. And in terms of running, I know there are so many different takes on how to prepare for something like this. But for me, it was just about consistency. So all through the winter, I did have some input from a coach in the Dark Peak through the Dark Peak Club in Sheffield, to help me with the training plan. But it was essentially not necessarily focusing on ever doing massive great distances. I knew that I can do the distances on the longer days of Cape Wrath. I didn't necessarily need to do that this winter, but it was more weekly mileage that's, I think, important to me. So making sure you're really consistently, and I guess it's what fits around your life as well. So, fitting in around work, but for me, kind of running most days in the week, but never huge distances at a time, but just that consistency of making sure your weekly mileage represents the sort of, obviously never the weekly mileage you're doing in the week in Cape Wrath, but enough that your body knows that this is what it can do, and some bits of speed training, which seems weird when you're actually going to be in ultra plod mode, but I think it enables you to kind of have those sort of more powerful moments where you're kind of doing big climbs, and then really importantly, especially towards the sort of latter stages of the training, was specificity. So I think I chatted to Marcus briefly about this in probably some delirious sort of chip fueled haze in a tent in the food tent at one point, but I think we chatted about how my theory of the Peak District, and particularly the sort of Dark Peak, being the perfect preparation ground for Cape Wrath. It is so specific, and obviously that whatever local bit people can find that works, but I think finding the sort of terrain and the different terrains, because in Cape Wrath it's I couldn't believe how heterogeneous the terrain was. You're having these miles and miles on forest tracks, but then you're also having these kind of pathless, boggy, although probably much less pathless, as you say, Marcus, than it used to be, and much less boggy than it normally is. But there definitely is some that is kind of pathless, rocky, heathery, tussocky, and so to find bits like that you can replicate on some of your days out, I think just means that when you come across it on the race, you feel good for it. So yeah,
I think
sorry, that was lengthy.
No, that's really fast. I mean, there's so much insight and wisdom in all of that, and the strength training. I think you need to be living in a cave not to have picked up on the importance of strength training in the last 10 years and how much that's spoken about now.
It's nothing novel, but just to reiterate it.
Yeah. And I always found when I was doing the 2-day mountain marathons and carrying a pack, I felt that having the strength of being a climber was really helpful to carry a pack. But I'm going to direct this kind of similar question to Marcus, because Marcus, is a well-regarded, renowned coach. And I'm fascinated to know about your approach, Marcus, and I guess talk us through your approach to Cape Wrath. Let's start at the start, and I'll be interested to hear what you say.
Again, like Sarah says, how long have we got on this? But interesting, if you go back to 2016, one of the reasons why I ended up doing the first year, you did an article in Traveling magazine, Shane, about Cape Wrath. And within that, you said that the Peak District was a perfect area for training for the race.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I remember reading it. And I lived in the Peak District at that time as well. And I was like, well, I'm living in the Peak District. And it was also 8 days, and it was my 8th year as being an ultramarathon runner. So I thought, okay, a bit of a nice tenuous link, and gives me opportunity to try multi-day race. And having worked on Dragons back in 2012, it's like, there's no way I'm doing that race. But yeah, I think for me, I very much look back over training I did the 2016 event, which in some respects is what I call would be my kind of classic multi-day build-up. And just like Sarah was saying, consistency is the key behind that as well. But I got slightly distracted in my build-up, so my training kind of didn't really properly, I would say, didn't switch to Cape Wrath training until March, because at the start of the year I was focusing on the Scottish Half Marathon Championships, because I was being rather egotistical and thinking if I could win the Vet 50 kind of Scottish Championships, that'd be quite a nice title to have. And I also wanted to get some speed back in the legs. So the first 3 months of the year, I was doing a lot of consistent training, but doing kind of 2 to 3 kind of high anaerobic sessions, so working on the speed, still getting around about 8 to 10 hours of training in, and I already had the plan built up. So as soon as I finished a half marathon, I would then switch over to the Cape Wrath training. The half marathon, I mean, I won the Scottish title, but I also was a bit kind of fatigued in the race, and then I caught the flu for 2 weeks afterwards. So kind of when I was hoping to get straight into Cape Wrath training, that was like disrupted. But for me, my approach is, yeah, similar to what I would use with the athletes I work with as well. And it worked well in the past. You know, we've had athletes like Hugh Chatfield and Graham Walton, who's won Cape Wrath as well. And yeah, it's based very much on that consistent approach with a lot of kind of, as Sarah was saying, kind of volume during the week, low intensity and that kind of aerobic state. So we often hear about this kind of zone two being battered around. And you know, I think that title can get a little bit kind of misguided, where if we kind of talk more about being at aerobic level, so very nice, easy, kind of low intensity to a degree, and with kind of peppered with one or two hill sessions, but then also focusing on a lot of elevation as well, with, you know, being in the Southern Highlands, but it's very easy to do. So a typical week would look like kind of, you know, 4 to 5 days of kind of double run days, so run in the morning, run in the afternoon, always having one rest day in there. And then I was only ever doing one long run a week as well. So I kind of really do not buy into this kind of ideology that you have to be doing back-to-back long runs for these big multi-events. All my ultra running career, I've never done back-to-back kind of long runs other than in the Dragon's Back race or in mountain marathons. And I've tried it twice in training by accident. And the fatigue the following week was just, yeah, pretty unpleasant. So for me, it's about keeping that consistency. And for this year's Cape Wrath, interestingly as well, I actually did fewer bigger long runs than I did in 2016. So in 2016, I did kind of two really big long runs in the Peak District, around about 6 or 8 hours. I tried the Derwent Devil. If you've never come across that one, Sarah, I highly recommend looking at that on a Dark Peak forum. It's the kind of the version of a Kinder Killer, but around the Derwent Reservoir. So that was one of my Cape Wrath runs. So I didn't do as big runs as that. I only did up to 4 hours for my kind of long runs. But I think in reflection, that actually meant I went into the race kind of less fatigued. I think when I look back at what I did in 2016, I was probably a little bit fatigued, which is why my times were slower early on, where this time I was a lot quicker. But yeah, you know, it's about listening to the body was the key thing as well, because there was a little blip I had kind of 3 weeks out or 4 weeks out from a race. We had a really hectic week and I ended up missing like 3 days of training. But you just have to kind of accept that and roll with it and not stress and then not try and load it back up. But yeah, you know, I think that's the danger. If you start losing training, you think, oh, I've got it. And also, you know, you always think, I've got to be doing bigger volume. I've got to be doing X amount of miles or X amount of hours of training to prepare for the events. But if you're getting the consistency, getting that time on feet, so important. And doing it at an intensity and at a level that keeps you injury free as well. Because, you know, if you start adding too much intensity in there or too much volume, that's when you're going to end up being injured.
That seems like very wise words. And I certainly know that kind of feeling when you miss a day or two of training, you're like, and you look at your diary and you think, I wonder if I can fit in a bit more later in the week. It's never a good idea. Sarah, one of the most common questions that we get kind of pre-event, and certainly it's the topic in the medical tent all the time, is about blister care. We do see a lot of manky feet at our expedition events. Statistically, 50 to 55% of all participants will end up in the medical tent for treatment for blisters. There'll be another bigger percentage or another percentage that treat themselves and we never see them in the medical tent. But it's quite an issue for these long days. Some people get no blisters at all. So it is possible if you can look after your feet well. Sarah, first question, did you get blisters? And then B, what's your approach to blister care?
Well, I am thrilled to talk about this topic. I feel like it's actually quite a passion because they are one of our best assets. And they can also be one of our worst enemies if things go wrong and can genuinely be race ending. So although it's not the sexiest of questions, Shane, I think it's a very good one that I'm happy to discuss.
Great.
So in answer to question one.
Does that mean I get a sexy question later on?
I did not get any blisters that cause me any problem. I had one 0.5 centimetre one which didn't do anything at all problematic. So I feel I have some small authority to answer the question. And I think with 2 caveats. So the first caveat is a lot of the things that I've learned about blister care, sort of foot care, blister prevention, have been wisdom gleaned from lots of wise people. So this is not of my own imagining. A lot of it I have to thank people like Nikki Summers for, the Queen of Feet, which is a title I don't think she likes very much. So there's that caveat. And then also I think this year we were exceptionally lucky that actually most years you do not have wet feet from about 20 minutes into each day, and your feet stay wet the whole time. So really the sort of pathogenesis of foot problems is there for a much longer time than what we were exposed to. But I do think that the heat and the sweat that we were exposed to probably does do some of the same things to your feet that kind of being bog wet does. So I think for me, blister prevention and foot care, and then blister treatment, if you get them, I would break it into pre-event and then obviously during event. And I just don't think we can. And again, this is I'm not reinventing the wheel, but it just needs to be reiterated. Your foot care starts months and months and months before the race, and that was what I did. So thinking about footwear choice and sock choice, so getting to know your own feet and what your feet do when they're exposed to water, when they're exposed to heat, when they're on their feet the whole time, when you're on your feet the whole time. And for me, I know that although my feet on paper and when they're measured aren't that wide, the biomechanics of my feet, I know that the toes love to spread out. So I always used to wear shoes that were based on that, probably too narrow. And then I would sometimes get the between toe blisters. So actually knowing that, what your feet need, particularly when they're kind of 5 days in and they will be a size bigger, they will be wider, they'll be puffier. So especially for something like this, when actually a lot of the running isn't that technical, or there are at least huge swathes that aren't that technical. So having a shoe that, for me, where the toes could spread out meant that I had less of that sort of sideways pressure on them, and that in combination with the right choice of socks, so often the ingingy toe socks that actually actively are separating your feet, that meant that issue of the kind of any between toe blisters was completely sorted. And then in terms of actually prepping your feet themselves, so the old wisdom of your calluses, your hardened feet will protect you, which I always used to subscribe to. I always, years and years, always used to say, my feet are really tough, I never get blisters, because I had all these sort of hard bits of skin. But when you have pressure applied to that bit for long enough, even the toughest feet, you'll just grow blisters underneath the calluses. Again, this is commonly said, but it's just really true. So sanding down, or filing down those calluses in advance, and I'm talking kind of months before the race, so kind of getting them nice and pared down, but then really frequently using a really proper ointment, so a really thick, high urea content, the sort of ointments that we give to people with diabetes and diabetic feet. So these kind of high urea content, if you literally go to a chemist and ask for your diabetic foot cream or your high urea foot cream, that's what they'll give you. So the one I use is Flexitol, but it's just whatever brand they have. And just, before bed, once your feet are filed and then cleaned, and then slather them in that, sometimes put a sock on, and you want to get to the point where you approach your race, you get to race a week before race day and your feet are supple, no calluses, nice and soft, or sort of not soft but supple, and then toenails nice and short, but don't do that just the day before the race, because otherwise you'll expose all that soft stuff. So that's the pre. Sorry, this is so long, but I just think it's what I've learned, and it's what I think works. So it's just because it just can be race ending if you don't look after your feet. And then during the race, I just cannot emphasize how worth it time investment it is to be really anal about your feet. I was getting messages from my family and friends being like, Sarah, all of your all of your tent mates seem to be starting earlier than you. You know, you seem to be not quite as hot off the mark. And that was strategic, but it was also because I just would spend, you know, that time in the morning once, you know, people were starting to leave. I was just really meticulously taping, and not taping any blisters, but taping preventatively. Because again, once you know your feet, I know the bits where after multiple days on, you know, I might get a hot spot, or I might have felt something. And so as the week goes on, kind of building your arsenal of different bits of taping, and it's learning how to tape beforehand. So knowing that, and by taping I'm talking about the you know, the KT tape, what often people think of as using for more like musculoskeletal strapping. It works really beautifully for hotspot preventative issues. So we're not talking once there's a huge blister, you know, then that needs different sort of dressings and treatment, but this is when it's purely a hotspot and just needs something to reduce the friction on it. So using the tape and often preparing it in advance is quite helpful. So when, you know, you're tired in the evening, so actually I came to the race with already pre-prepared different shapes for the different bits of your foot that are needed. And I think there are lots of videos to do kind of know about, you know, exactly how you do different bits, but making sure those edges are rounded off, so there are, you know, you'll end up with lots of little triangles everywhere, but that just stops it peeling away. It will stay in place all day, and then making sure it's under a reasonable amount of tension, but not so much that it will just sort of pop off. And then really, I would really recommend, before you even start, learning how to do the kind of toe taping, which is just slightly more tricky, but where you do some, you know, cut your bit of tape into the shape of an H, and you can make almost a little nest for your toe. It just works really well, but it's hard to describe, so just, it's on YouTube. But I think essentially being so almost militant about, you know, going into the day with your feet ready to go, because it will feel like a waste of time, or you might be worried about, well, if I don't start bang on the start time because I'm still faffing around taping my feet, you know, I can't afford to miss that time. I can't afford not to make the cutoff. But it's just a complete false economy, because if you then end up, you know, 4 hours into the day with painful feet, then that will slow you down more. So yes, that is my
That's a really excellent summary. Thank you, Sarah. And there's a really good article on the Cape Wrath Ultra website, essentially the same article on Dragon's Back website, talking about foot care. I think Sarah's essentially summarized the key points of that article perfectly. And if you are, when I see the kind of typical successful participant at Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath, they're not elite runners. They're mid-packers who are experienced and have done a good block of training and preparation, and their foot care is part of that process. So if you're sat there thinking, could I do Cape Wrath Ultra, part of that training package, preparation package, is thinking about how you'll look after your feet.
And for me, it was a point of personal pride, because I thought if I end up in the medical tent with a blister, meeting some of my colleagues from previous places, then my ego is going to be absolutely annihilated, because they're not going to let me hear the end of it. So don't be that. But obviously do go if you need to.
Yeah. So Sarah's given us some excellent advice from like a very specific, particular bit of kind of preparing for the race. Marcus, maybe you'd like to zoom out, go back to your wealth of experience, you know, as a coach, as a runner also, and what kind of advice would you give to someone who was thinking about, could I do Cape Wrath Ultra? Could I do Dragon's Back? What are the things that spring to mind for you?
Yes, that wasn't one of the questions you sent to me beforehand. I've not prepped that one. Darn it, gotta think of my feet now. Yeah, I think, you know, what you've already been talking about, but creating some sort of plan. You know, as Sarah was saying, either reaching out to a coach, or, you know, speaking to people who have done the event before. You know, try and glean as much information about the event, and knowing that both Cape Wrath and Dragon's Back have two completely different kind of challenges. And I would almost say that, you know, if you're looking at one or the other, I would always go for Cape Wrath first, because even though it's longer, it's slightly dare I say this, I'm going to say easier, but I'll justify why I say easier, because you get to day 4 and 5 and you only have, you know, a 19-mile day than a 27-mile day. And so most people are getting into camp mid-afternoon. You have way more time at camp on Cape Wrath than the Dragon's Back. The Dragon's Back every day is an ultra. They're big, long days. You know, even, you know, the year I was kind of fortunate to win it, I spent less time in camp than I did at Cape Wrath, and it was just a lot more higher pressure. Where Cape Wrath just feels like a holiday. You get into camp mid-afternoon, or you know, late afternoon, and you can sit around and have chips, and just the whole sense of a journey without the amount of elevation. So if you're thinking about doing one, I would say go Cape Wrath first, but then start drawing a plan up. You know, how long have I got leading up to it? Start doing some what we call periodization in training. So you're starting to block things out and work back from the event as well. So don't kind of start thinking, right now it's July, nearly August, how many months I got away for the event. Start from the event working backwards. So you then have your first kind of major block building up to it, kind of like 13, 14 weeks leading up to it. And then the block before that, you know, you're building up how you're going to develop that endurance. But also within that, you're kind of putting time in to be doing the research about the course, the kit you're going to be needing. You know, as you're already saying, there's so much information on your event websites about the kit you need as well. So you're fully in tune with that, and you're building up that kind of your own expertise for the event as well. And you're researching and looking into, okay, well, what is the footcare? What do I need to be doing? You know, like Sarah was saying, things like in gingy socks, you know, finding out the bits of kit, what works for you. Always kind of have a wry smile when I'm working with the athletes and they go, I want to talk about shoes today. It's kind of you know, it's what an open-ended question. There's so much choice you can kind of go with. But I think sometimes it's validating somebody's decision on that. But yeah, if you have questions or thoughts about stuff, yeah, get involved in some of the kind of Facebook groups or community groups and bat those ideas about however daft it might be, or yeah, people might roll their eyes at you, sort of thing, or because if you've got that uncertainty, it will kind of slow your preparation down. So you want to get those questions answered as quick as possible. But yeah, don't leave things to the last minute as well. Yeah, it's so important that, you know, when you're looking at the kit list and know how much weight you have. Yeah, again, there's amount of times I've been talking to people and they don't realize there's a 50 or 20 kilogram limit to the amount of kit you're able to take on the race. So be really, really kind of organized and getting things like your nutrition sorted out, because it is very different with Cape Wrath and the Dragon's Back in that you don't have aid stations kind of every 10 miles, which are kind of full of goodies to kind of tuck into. You are being self-sufficient, so you've got to solve that puzzle of what's my nutrition going to look like for 8 days? What am I going to need? What am I going to want? How am I going to get all the kind of carb requirements I'm potentially going to need for this kind of event? Yeah, all those questions need answering, and you've got to solve that puzzle kind of at least 3 months beforehand. So you've got it sorted. So you're not a month beforehand. So you're going, oh yeah, maybe I'll just take pork pies. Or as Joe Faulkner one year took a load of frozen kind of hummus wraps and let him defrost in his bag over a few days. And other weirder one from Tom Adams on our first 26 Cape Wrath had egg and rice balls, which he was still pulling out after day 4, and cooked rice. Oh, it's death on a stick. You're gonna die, man. You're gonna die. But yeah, you know, look at all the intricate parts of the puzzle, because it is, you know, there's so many different parts, and then making sure that you're training, you're planning that through, and that you're going to be building whatever base, whatever time you have available, you know, and be realistic. And also, another key thing is, I talk to athletes as well, is talk with your friends and family who are around who are going to be impacted by your training, and say, like, how much time can I dedicate to this? And be realistic with yourself as well. Because, you know, if you can only really commit to 8 hours of training a week, great. You know, that's still going to stand you in really good stead, or if it's 6 hours, 5 hours. But be realistic with that time available. But then be quite formulaic in how you put it all together as well.
Yeah, well, there's loads of good advice in there. I'm going to kind of maybe change gears a little bit. We've been quite focused on real practicalities. And I think it would be nice to jump back into a bit more about the ethos and vibe of the event. And I think there's no better question to ask other than the experience of Tent 7. So Tent 7, as the event evolved, even within the event team, built a little reputation for being a happy place full of a good tribe of people supporting each other. Sarah, could you just tell us about the kind of how the experience evolved and how it finished as well?
Oh, well, I mean, we were so lucky. I stand by the sheer luck that befell me when I clicked on the little drop down box and said, don't mind who, don't mind, you know, put me with anyone. And thankfully, some fab women did the same, and we ended up in this just incredible tent of just wonderfully joyful, psyched, supportive, fab people. We were really lucky, and I think it just makes your experience really. I mean, Marcus was saying about the whole vibe of camp was just sensational. Every day was, and I think like say in comparison to the Dragon's Back, the fact you actually get to spend a lot of time there, you know, from the moment where you arrive and one of the wonderful volunteers just comes and takes you to your tent. I think what you were saying, Shane, about how you like to make us feel nurtured once we're there. I mean, the nurture began when it was often, for some reason, Kirsty always seemed to meet me, and she would just kind of take me in her arms and take me to my tent, and then it was always amazing. It was never stopped amazing me that the tent was already made for you. You don't have to now sort of struggle with putting your tent up and your bags delivered there, and then yeah, so each day we'd turn up there, and then all the different members of the tent would arrive, and there was just such a thrill in hearing about everyone's adventure that day. You know, the tales, the sort of sketchy moments, the fact that someone, you know, I don't know, all these different tales just got shared, and different, you know, everyone seemed to have their little struggle at different times. And what was really lovely is everyone inevitably will go through, you know, have a day that's more rough, and it won't be the same one. You know, different people find different things challenging, or, you know, run into an issue with their kit or blisters or whatever. And to share that in a group of people who really genuinely have each other's back is just so special, because it makes it easier. You know, it makes you feel more confident that you can complete it, and you can, you know, sort of move forward. And I think the boundaries were very quickly diminished. So, you know, intimate tick checks and, you know, treating chafing in various different parts, and blister care. Yeah, it was really just wonderful. And we are obviously all still in touch, and we're actually having a meetup with not just Tent 7 but some other Tent 7 plus a couple of other people who bonded with us, and we're all meeting back up for a weekend of running in the autumn, and a gig in there as well. So you really do meet people who you just have these shared experiences, shared interests. You meet your like-minded people, and yeah, that's really incredible. And to answer the second part of the question, we were just so thrilled that every member of the tent completed the whole thing, which I think is pretty novel. And obviously what's so incredible about this event is that they are huge days that throw everything at you, and so, you know, DNFs are or not DNFs, but not meeting cut-offs or not finishing that day, or running into issues. It is really common. I don't know the exact stats, Shane. I'm sure one of you guys can first in, but it's, you know, these are not things that everyone could and should confidently go in knowing they're going to finish, because it's not a given. But what's really lovely is that the option of the Explorer is always there, that you can, if you don't make a cut-off, or if you know, things don't go to plan, you still have an option of carrying on this incredible, as Marcus called it, sort of running holiday, where you're just in these absolutely magnificent places doing the thing you love. So you can change to it as an option, which I think is very a real comfort to have that in your back pocket. But to digress, that is, you know, absolutely no shame and huge achievement completing the Explorer. But to have everyone in our crew do the whole thing, I think meant a lot to everyone. And there were some particularly inspiring and humbling people who really fought a lot of demons out there and took it pretty close to the mark. I think all of our nerves were in tatters at the end of one of the days. So yeah.
I've just quickly glanced at the stats. I don't remember them off the top of my head. So for 2024, 60% of all the starters completed the full course. Another 40% completed the. That's wrong. That's the wrong. Yeah, sorry. 50% did the full course. 40% did the Explorer, and that means 90% of everyone who starts the race has done something every day and arrived at Cape Wrath, which is a fantastic way, and it's how we want it to be. And I think the Explorer, it's really funny. Some of the people on the Explorer doing the half days do the best part of 250 kilometers over the week of the event. In any other world, that would be an extraordinary achievement. It would be the event. And at Cape Wrath, it's okay, it's not the full course, but it's an amazing achievement, and you get to go on a brilliant running holiday.
And it's never treated as what I think is so refreshing is it's never treated as a cop out. You know, there's no sense that anyone doing that is doing anything less incredible. It's like everyone's celebrated, everyone's
Absolutely.
so excited for you. And with the added bonus that there's some cafe stop potential, which frankly.
Marcus, I'm going to freestyle on the questions again and maybe ask you a bit about kind of your personal experience at the event. And I mean, you've been to a lot of events over the years, and I just wondered how, you know, that. I mean, I would hope the event feels a bit like a running holiday. That is what we want to achieve. And how did it measure up for you in that way?
All right, yeah, I mean, it's complete holiday. You know, I had an absolute kind of whale of a time. And interesting, different dynamic this time round. So in 2016, there was only three of us in one of the tents. I just had Pavel Polonsi, and this other guy, Mark from Glasgow, who was getting up 5 o'clock every morning. He was first out, and then Pavel and myself were rocking out at 9 o'clock in the morning. But I was sort of thinking, oh, Pavel Polonsi, go back over the Spine history. Pavel's got an amazing kind of history of events, but he was the most untidiest person in the tent I've ever known. Every evening, it was just like somebody stuck a stick of dynamite in his bag, and it was a good job there was only the three of us in this tent because he managed to cover the whole floor with all his kit. So this time, and there was only seven of us this time in our tent, so I think we lucked out a little bit. And as the oldest, I very quickly just commandeered one pod to myself. I kind of made that decision, and I was like, I think I was second in. I was also in a tent with Lewis, but yeah, just like Sarah said, the whole dynamic and that relationship that we developed in our tent. We only lost one person, unfortunately. Well, they retired. We didn't like literally lose them. It wasn't like they were still somewhere on day 5 or something, but they dropped out after day 4. But yeah, that relationship and that support, what was developed over the 8 days in our tent, and yeah, just like I said, we're still in touch and sharing stuff online and through WhatsApp. But there is that whole, and it does help, I think, when you have the good weather. But there's also, you know, as Sarah was also saying, you know, you're with such a like-minded group of people, this wonderful kind of tribe almost, and such a shared interest that you can sit down for dinner and be sat opposite complete strangers and then just have wonderful conversations, not just about what you've been doing that day, but about other people's adventures, hearing what they've been up to. And you just create these little micro moments with what would normally be complete strangers, but you're in this shared community and there's that connection. And you might, you know, you might only see that other person out on the trail or later on at another camp, but you just have that then you're able to have that little nod and acknowledgement of that person. And so that's wonderful, because normally we're so busy, so hectic, doing lots of stuff, and to be able to just sit down and chat to either complete strangers or people you're getting to know over the 8 days and deepen those relationships. Like they ended day one, bumped into Tim Laney, who I've known for years, and we ended up having dinner together and catching up. And it was like, well, we would never have thought we could get some time to do things like that. So yeah, this is why I really call it like a running holiday. And also what was really refreshing as well, you're able to chat to everybody and anybody. There's no airs or graces. Nobody's kind of going around, oh, I'm the best here, or there's no egos. Everybody's ego is really low. And me and Sarah were just chatting in the dinner queue for chips, weren't we, one afternoon? And that's the whole, there's such a wonderful friendliness about it. And then you take that out onto a trail as well. So every day, everybody's really supportive and friendly. And everybody you see, there's always just a few words of encouragement, even those who are doing the explorer. And yeah, that just makes the event so special and unique. You do some races and you run past other competitors, or you get caught up in races, and so many egos being battled about, and people are too caught up in their own little world. But there just seems to be, as the week goes on, more and more openness and people happy to share. And yeah, either shed a tear or just share that raw emotions we're all experiencing. It's just become this kind of wonderful, kind of diverse circus almost of people trying to get to the end of every day.
I think I mean you've hit so many themes that are special about the event, and I think as the event team as well have that experience of connecting with like-minded individuals, the shared adventure, shared journey, and I think you get that, yeah, those special moments for the event team, and I certainly know I get that as a race organizer. And I've made some extraordinary friendships over the years through people I have literally met randomly at the events, which is really amazing. I think one of the key factors that helps define particularly Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath is this sense of uncertainty and adventure. And it doesn't matter who you are and how good you are, there's no guarantees you're going to finish. And it just brings everyone down to a much more humble level. And the course and the weather will always reign as champions, reign as top dog, won't they? Sorry, I didn't make myself very clear there, but I think you know what I mean. Libby, I was going to suggest that why don't you take over with some of and there's been a couple of questions that have come in, and maybe you can do the quick fire questions as well.
Yeah, I was already planning to ask one of them if you didn't get around to it. So
okay, over
to you. Maybe I'll start there. So our catering manager, Tim, said that the 2025 edition of Cape Wrath saw the most amount of chips eaten ever in the history of Cape Wrath. So Sarah, I will ask you first. But how many bowls of chips did you have per day?
I think I can probably hold myself personally accountable and responsible for that statistic. I had at least 2, if not 3, every day. And crucially, the elite, the optimum chip consuming situation is not just the chips themselves, but the location. And I can highly recommend getting into camp, getting your protein shake, going straight to the chip tent, and then going and lying in the river with the chips.
Ooh. And
eating the chips in the river.
I thought you were going to say beanbags, so that, yeah.
No, get in the river. Life doesn't get any better than that feeling with chips and cold water and views.
The swim spots are pretty good. Marcus, what about you?
Yeah, I limited myself to just one bowl a day because I didn't want to take other people's chips when we're getting into camp so early. Really, I thought it'd be unfair if I just Give them all to me, please. I'll just take that big tray full. So yeah, I was just big. No, I probably, yeah, maybe two at a stretch in the latter week, but for me, this is the big revelation from 2016 as well. And I was so happy when I went into Sainsbury's like a month before the event. So in 2016, I discovered that squeezy Marmite on chips and a multi-stage race. It is the most amazing condiment that you can put on chips. Yeah, ketchup, mayonnaise, HP sauce doesn't get anywhere near squeezy Marmite on chips. And I even converted quite a few people, kind of even Lewis, who came finished third, he converted him to Marmite on chips. But you got to get the squeeze because you can squeeze it on.
Just right.
Takes your chips to, and I think that's, when we get, I don't know if we've seen the feedback form yet. Do those come out when we get kind of what could we do to make the event better? I'm going to say we need to squeeze in Marmite at the end of every day.
Noted.
Yeah,
Try it. If you're not
if
not tried it yet. I mean, obviously, if you don't like Marmite, then don't do it. Because, maybe if you don't like Marmite, this could be the way that gets you into Marmite. So was that meant to be a quick fire question? We've gone on for.
No, it's fine. Well, it leads me in actually nicely to the other question, which was, what was the one luxury item that maybe you bought more than one, but what was your like top luxury item that you brought with you into camp? So Marcus, was yours Marmite or?
Yeah, Marmite was definitely one of my luxury items. Also this year, I took a really good set of headphones with me to kind of listen to kind of music in the evenings and the afternoons. So that's to get some kind of chill time. And because the weather was so good, I kind of took a fairly reasonable, decent, just in the year one. So that was quite a good kind of luxury item. But one of the other key items, if we can kind of jump back to some of the foot care as well, is using gurney goo as well, which I think is one of the best kind of anti-chafe creams you can get. It's not the cheapest, but that kind of keeps all the chafes at bay. And then this year it was a really good sun cream as well.
Yeah.
And a bigger bowl, because 2016 I took too small a bowl, so I really was limited on the chip.
That's the answer, because my bowl's quite small, so maybe my 2 to 3.
If you had a normal size bowl, you would have only been on one.
That it definitely is a good point, actually. Maybe I need to make that a bit more prominent on the website. Like, make sure your bowl is definitely big enough. What about you, Sarah?
Oh, hard to say. I can't really have an evening without a peppermint tea. So I did bring a little luxury little one of my dry bags just had a few tea bags of peppermint tea. I also brought some Smarties just as a little treat, but obviously you spend all day eating sweet things, so I didn't touch them at all. So yeah, the peppermint tea, I would say. And I don't know if this counts as a luxury item, but I borrowed my husband's massive Nalgene, which is 1.5 litres, that you can then that is then your drinking vessel for the whole evening, just to keep refilling and get hydrated. But it also doubles as a really hard foam roller. So we shared that around the tent because it is, a bit of luxury to actually roll your legs out in the evening.
Nice. Okay, I'll do one more of my quickfire questions. Sarah, what was your favourite overnight camp?
It's so hard. I think if you asked me based on swim spot, I'd have a different answer. But pure for the whole joy and experience of it, Kinloch, which is day 4, was just, I think it was the first one evening that was just a bit more free of midges. And it was just a glorious evening. The views up the mountains up on the right were just the whole thing. And I think it's a shorter day, so everyone was back much earlier, so there was a lot of beanbag time, there was a lot of chilling and chatting, and kind of thinking you had so much time that you could then put the militant life camp admin on hold. So that was delightful. And I think that was one of my favourite meals as well. I can't remember what it was, but I remember being in a really happy place in that camp.
Good. I think that was the new camp, Shane, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, new camp. Yeah.
Where you could go to the shop as well, couldn't you, on the way into camp?
Couldn't be bothered with that. That was too far.
I saw people queuing for ice creams.
Yeah, the swim spot was a bit treacherous. Bit of a slippery slope on the way down.
Marcus, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to be boring and agree with Sarah.
Okay.
Because two other reasons. Well, it was the first time we had a coffee van.
Mhm.
So that afternoon I was able to have a coffee, which was just
Bold.
fantastic. Yeah, I mean, early enough in the afternoon not to kind of keep me awake all night. And also, Lewis, bless him, walked into the village, brought a 4-pack of Guinness Zero, and we sat having a Guinness Zero in camp with a coffee. I may have been on my second bowl of chips that evening. But yeah, that one was cracking to get coffee. But then, and then also you kind of like, you know, you're halfway. You're in the midpoint. You're like, right, I've just got to survive another 4 more days. Which is why then, if I could have a second camp 6 is also kind of high up there. And also partly because there was a load of sausage rolls and extra food when we got into camp that afternoon, and it was just glorious to have something different to eat as well. But you also, you know, again, day 6 camp, you're like, that's the big day's done now. I've just got to survive day 7 and home and dry. But yeah, day 4, the new day 4 camp was fantastic location.
Good. A proper running holiday.
Absolutely. When there's coffee and somebody brings the Zero Guinness as well.
So I will ask, there's been a couple of questions on the chat. If anyone has any others, please drop them in. But Sophie has asked, we've spoke a little bit, I guess, around camp, but what are your top tips on camp admin? So Marcus, I will direct that question to you.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, get organising with your kit lists, get a spreadsheet going, know how much everything kind of weighs, because you've got to be within that 20 kilogram limit, knowing that the bag itself weighs like 800 grams, so you're really down to 19 kilograms. And my other piece of advice as well, and this goes back to kind of, so we're talking about mountain marathons as well, and just kind of general kind of mountain craft, is I recommend using different coloured dry bags for all your kit as well. So you have your kind of camp clothes in one dry bag of a different colour, your running clothes in a different colour bag, your nutrition. You've maybe only got 3 or 4 different dry bags in your big dry bag, and you can easily get to them, and it stops having a kit explosion or kit go and walkabout. He said he lost his watch on the start of day 6, but hey, let's not dwell on that too much. But yeah, having that kind of organised in there and keeping everything kind of in these separate kind of containers just makes that organisation, and it just removes some of that kind of cognitive fatigue when you get into camp a bit later and you're trying to sort stuff out. You're like, blue bag, that's my camp clothes, happy days.
Yeah.
I would add to that. Oh, sorry, was it
No,
one
go
question?
ahead. Yeah,
if you would echo everything that Marcus said, but I would also add, and this sounds ridiculous until you are in that cognitive fatigue that you just mentioned, Marcus, but making yourself a really ridiculous little to-do list for both the evening and the morning. And it can develop as you kind of get into it, but I would do it in advance and then let it kind of, mold as you go through. But nothing is too simple to go on the list. And so even going to the toilet, brushing your teeth, getting your bedding out, and it's almost like your simple brain being able to say, yes, I'm going to tick that off, and it just means you don't miss something really obvious. So making sure your watch is charged, and I think the key, I would say, key to success is eating enough. On these days you are, and cumulatively you are in such a calorie deficit that it's almost a game of how early can you start to get those calories in, but also get the salts and the hydration. Because if you leave it too late, so if you kind of crack on with other admin and then think, oh, I should probably eat something, your stomach will get too full. You have to spread out the eating, because the amount of space you have in your stomach is not enough to make up the calorie deficit that you will have. So kind of getting in a protein shake if you do them, getting in the chips, then doing a bit more admin. So just have your plan, because you won't be able to freestyle on the day because your brain will be too tired.
That's very useful. I like this question from Christine. So she's asking about the Midgetes, and I didn't think the Midgetes were too bad. There was only a few camps, but are there any truly tried and tested ways of not getting bitten to bits when you're out there so long? Sarah, how did you deal with the Midgetes? Did you get bit?
So I totally agree that I don't think it was a bad year for midges. I've definitely had much worse midge attacks in Scotland, even at Stanage, to be honest. So I think we were pretty lucky. But I think to reassure you, because you said sort of being out there so long, generally, other than a few little patches in woodland bits, during the days, I don't think midges should be your primary concern. I don't know if we were just lucky this year, but really, once you've kind of set off, you're moving, you tend to get up, there's a bit more of a breeze. There may be a couple of patches during the days that you may end up having some, but I think you're through them quickly. So I wouldn't worry about actually, during the running. It's really when you're in the camp. And I think in terms of tried and tested things, obvious things like long sleeves. So even if it's hot, you still want to probably be wearing, your long trousers. You can tuck them into your socks, long sleeves. And midge hat is on the mandatory kit for a reason. It would be absolutely kamikaze to go on this trip without it. Your life would very quickly become not worth living. And it's just so funny seeing people in the tent kind of lifting up the thing to get a few spoonfuls in, and then, or like brushing their teeth. And then I mean, I use smidge. I know some people are absolutely the hill they'll die on is the Avon Skin So Soft, particularly a lot of my friends who live in Scotland. But I think the barrier methods rather than the skin methods are probably more important. And then essentially being very vigilant. Tent 7 was very vigilant with the tent zip. You'd have to kind of, and someone can help you as you get in. Someone who's near the tent can kind of zip and unzip when it's a particularly bad day. But yeah.
Would you have anything to add to that, Marcus?
So I don't know if I'm right or wrong on this, Sarah, but many years ago I read some research about having a good quality of B12 in the body helps combat kind of midges. So this is where my fantastic Marmite on chips comes in handy. Obviously, don't smear it on yourself, because you don't want to be doing politically incorrect stuff on Cape Wrath. You don't want to get cancelled or anything, or look completely daft either, really. But I find eating having a lot of B12 in my diet, and also I think being ginger, it's one of these perks of being ginger. I don't know what it is, but like a couple of our guys in our tent were just absolutely completely covered in like measles or something, and I'm like, yeah, fine. I think perks of being ginger. They try and bite me once, and I'm like, ugh.
It's not ginger, a modifiable thing though. You're born with that.
Unfortunately, thankfully I know, so I'm quite happy with that. But I think the midge net, and then again, this is part of the kind of camp admin in some respects, isn't it? If it is midgy outside, you really want to try and plan things to be precise. And if you're going to fill bottles up, wash your teeth, go and eat, you want to be really precise and kind of do them quick and get out and be doing stuff, rather than kind of wandering around camp. Oh, I'm going to go and sort this, I'm going to do that. If it's midgy, it was like, right, I'm just going to go and fill my bottles up quickly and get out and try and find the spots in camp which are in the sun. But again, I think it's part of that kind of build up, isn't it? Either have some opportunities to come up to Scotland, or if you say Stanage or Birchin's Edges, I've been midged off there in the past for climbing. Not that you really want to go and experience midges, but kind of get yourself in there and go, right, what works, what doesn't. I mean, unfortunately, they're just the joys of part of Scotland, aren't they? But again, it's that kind of part of camp admin. So you can buy a full midge suit, which I took on the first year, which one of his whole jackets, which you can zip up and be completely enclosed. But they're only bad early on in the morning, and then I kind of 8 o'clock they cleared.
Yeah, I might just add in that having been on a lot of events as a participant and as an organizer in Scotland, what you tend to see is in those kind of summer months in particularly, this period between about, well, from full morning onwards, so not dawn itself necessarily, but this maybe 2 to 3 hour window in the mornings and a similar time period at dusk when the midges are annoying and bad. And certainly if you don't have a midge net, they can be terrible. If you've got a midge net and you've got good admin, they're absolutely manageable. And also remember that midges can't fly if there's more than about 4, 5 miles an hour of wind. So you only need the tiniest of breezes and you have no midges. And most editions of Cape Wrath, we've had enough breeze that there's no midges at all. You go through almost the entire week and you don't see a midge. I think this year we had that what would ordinarily be these beautiful still mornings and evenings, and so you have a few midges, but they're never that bad.
There's another question here, which might be more directed at you, Shane. What is the participant completion rate for the full Cape Wrath versus the full Dragon's Back? I don't know if you have that information or you have a bit of a sense of.
Yeah, so roughly speaking, Dragon's Back full course completions is about 35%, like certainly last year. And then hatchling completions on top of that is roughly another 35%. So it brings us to about 70% completing something every day. And I think this goes back to Marcus's comment earlier. Cape Wrath is easier. The statistics support that. The key feature with Dragon's Back is you are going mountain summit to mountain summit, so it's up, down, up, down. It's much rougher overall. With Cape Wrath Ultra, you are following the logical, easiest line weaving through the glens. The statistics change enormously depending on the weather. So if you look at 2021 edition of Dragon's Back Race, our completion on the full course dropped to about 24%. That was the year when the first 3 days were absolutely roasting. If you look at 2022 Cape Wrath Ultra completion, I can't remember off the top of my head what it dropped to, but it did drop. That was the very, very wet year. And then you look at Cape Wrath this year, which was really a pretty good year from a participant's perspective. You know, we're at 90% people finishing one or other of the courses, either the full course or the Explorer. That's great. I think an event that's getting 90% of the starters to the finish, that's what we want to achieve. But some of that is out of our hands.
Cool. So there was another final question here from Gareth. Training. So did you have any big events in the lead up, or was Cape Wrath Ultra the focus for the year's training? And there's kind of a secondary question. Is it a good idea to do other events beforehand, putting aside your personal preference? So I know, Marcus, you mentioned that you'd done some kind of quicker races in the lead up. Is that typical, or what would you usually suggest, I guess, to your athletes who are looking to take on Cape Wrath?
Yeah, I think the thing you want to be thinking about is, I mean, Inverness half marathon, you can't get kind of more removed and obscure, and kind of Cape Wrath in some respects is like the opposite end of the spectrum. The only kind of bit it maybe fits in with is the first 10K of day one, really. So it's not the approach I would normally advise people to do, but it depends on what experience you have as an athlete and what your background is. But the other thing I always say to my athletes is how does the race you're looking at complement Cape Wrath or Dragon's Back? So for an example, you know, you might think of, I might do the South Downs Way 50. This is just pure example. And again, those two races are very different because of the terrain you're going to be running over. So you want to be thinking about, if you're going to enter a race, what am I going to learn in this? What's it going to help me in my preparation for Cape Wrath? Is it running over similar terrain? Because if not, I would challenge you and probably say, well, why not, you know, go and just spend 2 days in the hills, go up to the Lake District, go to North Wales, or if you can get up to Scotland and do a couple of days recce's, or go to the Peak District. because that is going to be far more beneficial than signing up and doing like a 50-mile ultra marathon or 100-mile. And the other danger as well when you're doing a race is that you potentially might be pushing it a little bit more. And so your recovery is going to be bigger afterwards. So you might have to then spend a week, 2 weeks recovering from that event. Where if you go to a mountainous area peak district for 2 days, 3 days, and you just have good time on feet, spend a bit of time on that sort of terrain, you're going to recover very quickly and be back into training. But if you're looking at that year-long build-up to it, you could be going, well, great, I've got all this time. Maybe, in the autumn, I might do something like the Om or, some other kind of mountainous event where I'm getting into the hills. And so this is where it comes into that kind of planning process, like I was talking earlier about kind of, deciding where you're going to be putting certain stuff and also planning some of those big days and, planning a couple of weekends where you are going away. But, the joys of the UK, unfortunately, you can plan a weekend away and you get somewhere and it's just foul. But then that can be quite good because that then teaches you to be more diligent in those conditions and how you look after yourself and how you kind of maybe change your plans and a bit more adaptability rather than, right, I'm going to go over the top, so I'm going to do a more low-level course and learn how to kind of keep myself warm in these conditions. So yeah, so even when I did Cape Wrath 2016, I didn't race in the kind of 5-month build-up to it. I think my last race was kind of in the autumn before. And again, that was purely because I just couldn't find a race that kind of fitted in. I know Shane does the GL3D, but that to me again would be too close. Even things like Northern Traverse again, too close. You've got to be thinking that any event you've got to have a good time of recovery, and you don't really want it to disrupt that consistency. So I hope that helps, Gareth. And yeah, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, so I do apologise. But as an athlete and as a coach, I think it's really important that you structure that build up with the right events, but be questioning. And I have this conversation a lot of times with athletes. Will it complement what you're doing? And there's times where you want to have a bit of fun, don't you? Absolutely, go and have fun. But, I'm not saying don't go and do races because you want to go and do them because they're going to be fun. But also, if you're spending this much time, energy, and finance onto what is going to be an amazing 8 days of running, then you want to be selective with how you do your preparation for it as well.
Sounds like good advice.
Sarah, just out of interest, did you do any races in the lead up to Cape Wrath?
No, so yeah, echoing everything that Marcus has said, really. I would only add, because you kind of mentioned like physical repercussions of an event, that you're, I suppose, doing it at a higher intensity if you're racing, the risk of injury or longer recovery requirement. But I'd also say mentally, if this is, for me, this is my A race. I've got a couple of other things planned on the horizon, sort of at the latter half of the year, kind of after it. But for me, this is like the big. This is the big one, and I think do it justice. I wanted to. You want to get onto that start line and be mentally fresh, and you're gonna need to dig pretty deep. Although it's the easier out of the two, I'll have to test that theory. But I don't think you want to go in carrying any mental fatigue or baggage. Although that's hard to say coming off came into it off A&E night shift, so I was definitely had quite a lot of mental fatigue and baggage. But I think digging your heels in, digging deep in a race context, I think definitely depletes your reserves of kind of mental grit, or I personally think it probably would do. And I think getting into sort of day, going to day 3, for example, when you've already done a couple of days and you're having to do the toughest day and then doing another really long day a couple of days later, I think you're going to want those reserves of grit to be pretty replete.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Shane, are you going to say something then?
No, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think we've got any more questions. So the only thing I was going to say is this year at Cape Wrath, we did a series of films, which Sarah was one of the subjects of our films. Your film is actually out today, Sarah. I've posted it earlier. So I'm going to put a link to the playlist on YouTube in the chat if anyone's interested. But we did 4 films following, I think, 12 different runners and their kind of journeys across the trail, which well, I personally think it's very interesting to see how everyone's like journeys evolved and where everybody ended up. But I'll leave you to watch them all.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Libby. I would just like to say thank you to everybody this evening, Marcus and Sarah, for giving up one of your evenings, sharing your insights and wisdom with us all. I'm very grateful for that. Libby, probably for doing a shorter run than you would have liked, and being here this evening. Thank you. And then everyone who's kind of been in our audience this evening, I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you feel inspired to go and have a big adventure in the mountains. And obviously we'd like to see you at Cape Wrath or Dragon's Back, but there's so many good things to do out there, so get on with it and make the most of your opportunities. I'm afraid the end of our webinar is a little bit brutal. We kind of hit end, and that's that. So I will say thank you very much to everybody, and I will hit the end button. If you stay in the group, you might be able to chat until nobody's left. I think that's how it works, but I have to leave first to end the webinar. So good night, thank you, and hopefully see you at an event soon.
Bye, thanks.